The phrase work-life balance has been part of our professional vocabulary for decades. But in a world reshaped by a global pandemic, hybrid work, and now artificial intelligence, is this concept still fit for purpose? In this episode, we sit with Vinu Akde. Vinu is a seasoned people and cultural leader with close to 2 decades of experience across global organizations. We will explore how the relationship between work and life is fundamentally evolving, what that means for leaders and employees today. With this, allow me to welcome Vinu to Simply Awesome People. Vinu, welcome.
Thank you, Tushar, for the warm welcome. Hello, everybody. This is Vinu. 18 years in HR across industries from fintech to consumer packaged goods, retail, and all other different industries that I served as a part of my previous roles. Primary expertise is in scaling hypergrowth organizations, building HR practices from scratch and then scaling them. And it's more of a build, operate, and transfer basis is what I love to work on. Have established quite a few successful HR practices across organizations, ranging from mid-sized organizations to as well as Fortune 500 organizations. And the fact that has kept me going this entire while is my love for interacting with people, trying to bring out the best in them while also growing personally as a career professional and more importantly as a human. So thank you, Tushar, for the warm welcome on the Simply Awesome People podcast today.
Thank you, Vinu. Vinu, from your vantage point as a people and culture leader, how has the definition of work-life balance changed over the last 10 years? And what do you think has driven that evolution?
So if you recall, around 10 years ago, work-life balance mostly meant leave work at work. Today, there's nothing of that existing because people are answering messages from airports, reviewing decks after dinner, or taking calls while picking up kids from school. So the conversation has shifted more from balance, I feel, to sustainability. What has really changed for me is that employees now care much more about flexibility and having that control and well-being is also a very important part of that, rather than just titles or compensation. Technology blurred boundaries first, and then the pandemic completely changed expectations, as you've experienced, I must say. People got a real glimpse of what it is to have flexibility in your lives, and it's very hard to unsee that once we've experienced it.
Makes sense. You made an interesting point about in the past we could leave work at work, and one of the vehicles for us to be able to do that was desktop computers.
Yep.
People had desktop computers at their work, and
Yep.
they used to log off or log in the mornings and log off in the evenings.
Yeah.
Or people that work in shifts, basically at the start of their shift and end of their shift.
Yeah.
What evolved is like the introduction of these devices, the softwares that then made it possible for people to work from practically any location, for that matter, right?
Yeah,
You
certainly.
did mention the pandemic.
Yeah.
Outside of the pandemic, where did you visibly notice this disruption or this evolution of people blending work with their lives?
Yeah. I think it started with the introduction of smartphones in everyday life. Then that's when boundaries really started blurring, is what I feel. The moment people could respond or work from anywhere, the separation itself started fading. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the pandemic was a real turning point. Overnight, it was like work and life, they started living in the same space. It was like this fusion reaction, if I can call it. And leaders were suddenly on video calls. And we saw some funny videos with kids in the backgrounds, even with senators having their kids, walking into rooms in international meetings, dogs barking. We had deliveries at the door. So, and people realize that we are not just robots working for organizations, we are also human. And that human side started coming to the fore during the pandemic. How much ever we want to ignore, but I would love to say that the pandemic was a real turning point when people understood what flexibility could do for them. Uh, this kind of also forced organizations to rethink old assumptions around productivity and trust, and organizations had no other option but to start trusting their employees that, hey, they can do uh, their work and they can offer the same level of productivity or even better when they are working from home. So I think it's the overall collaboration, if I can use the word, for technology and global situations.
Makes sense. Post-pandemic, many employees said that they felt that they were more productive working remotely or flexibly. Yet, many leaders pushed for a return to office.
Yeah.
Um, what does that tension reveal about where organizations still struggle to evolve their thinking? There was this article published by Gartner back in 2021,
Yeah.
which basically highlighted that most flexible organizations are highly productive.
Yeah.
Yet you feel or you notice that a lot of leadership in most organizations still push and are pushing for people to return back to office.
Yeah.
Why do you think this tension exists? And what do you think will be the evolution uh, of this ask from leaders or employers, and this belief that from employees that they are more productive working flexibly?
So flexibility, I think it sounds simple, but operationally and culturally, it's very, very hard. Uh, it requires a few things, is what I feel. It requires trust, most important. Then it requires strong managers who can trust, who can offer that trust. It requires clear accountability. And I would also say it requires a willingness to rethink how work gets done. I feel a lot of organizations are still built around old leadership models where visibility equals productivity. There's also fear involved. Now, leaders worry about losing culture, innovation, collaboration, or fairness across teams that don't have all the same flexibility options. Um, but the reality I feel is that flexibility is no longer viewed as a perk by employees. It's increasingly becoming a part of how people evaluate whether a company actually understands modern work. So that is how I think we need to also change and evolve our thinking.
Makes sense. I think you touched upon multiple aspects over there.
Yeah.
I believe there was a research done by a large organization. If I remember correctly, it was Microsoft,
Mhm.
where Microsoft did an analysis of all of their employees, and they kind of highlighted three key opportunities where those three specific aspects were the most critical for people to actually meet in person. And those three aspects were, as follows. One of them was when a person joins a team or a firm newly. The second opportunity that Microsoft highlighted was when teams are working on extremely complicated or complex problem statements. And the third opportunity was for teams that are distributed. So this revealed a bunch of things, right? I mean, it's from, I think, first and foremost, I think this assessment or this analysis itself is pretty eye opening, and it has a balanced perspective from an employer's perspective. Regardless of, for a second we'll keep aside employers wanting people to be more productive, employers and firms wanting to be as profitable as possible. We'll keep that aside for a second. Let's assume that all employers have the best of the intentions for their people, and with those intentions, if the idea is to make the work life structure as as feasible and as conducive for everybody, including the employees and employers. I think the flexibility part or the hybridization, where a lot of employers are actually requesting people to be in the office on a few days instead of all of the days. I think that in my perspective is a bit of a win-win. What do you think? Do you agree, disagree to that perspective, or do you have a different perspective on that altogether?
Um, for me, one of the biggest barriers when companies talk about flexibility is the culture itself is quietly rewarding overwork. You know, so it's the complete antithesis of what we are trying to propagate. Um, employees employees notice quite a few things very quickly. If people who get promoted are the ones constantly online or replying at midnight or not even taking a vacation, they notice all these things. Another big issue I feel is meeting overload. you know uh, Employees usually follow what leaders model, uh, and what happens is people are given flexibility, but their calendars are packed for like 10 hours straight. So you can go to the office for all you care. Yeah. And what are you doing there? Sitting on Teams calls in the office, because some people managed to make it in, some people couldn't. And eventually you need to take that call online to ensure participation. And when I say, leadership behaviors matter a lot, and employees following what leaders model, such things are not written in employee handbooks, right? So it's I feel again it's a few aspects that we cover here: behavior modeling. Then we are talking about uh, walking the talk, and we are talking about what practically happens when you ask people to show up at work. How beneficial is it? Or you're just calling them into the office to sit in online calls, and that totally kind of defeats the purpose.
Makes sense. And thank you so much. I think you shared, and if I'm able to summarize, right, I feel you actually gave a lot of leaders and employers a few tips, if not
Yeah,
tools. One of them was, trust, which you spoke at the beginning of our conversation,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I think employers should start with trust first, and trust
yeah,
begins with person A trusting person B first, which
yeah,
is the employer trusting their people first.
yeah.
The other aspect I believe you were trying to highlight was about transparency. Transparency
Correct,
in communicating the intent for employers requesting their people to work from the office.
correct,
Um, Third thing I feel is one of the most important is incentives.
correct,
Tying the right incentives to employee behavior. Basically, are employees setting the right kind of motivations in place to make employers buy into and trust and align with the idea of them wanting to come back to offices?
correct.
Right? These are really great points, and thank you so much for sharing that. Now, from an employee's perspective, what do you think should employees do for them to be able to reach a handshake between what most employers are asking for and their work life, their flexibility? You also made a great and a very relevant point about calendars being blocked throughout the day.
Yeah,
Any advice that you have for employees to help them navigate uh, the asks of being available virtually throughout the day?
yeah. So again, I would like to go a little deeper in here
Mm,
and not just what you see the issues are on surface.
mm.
So for me, employees need to pay attention to the behavior, not just the messaging. So for me, that is very critical. Now, every company talks about well-being and balance now, but the real culture shows up in who gets promoted, how leaders behave, whether boundaries are actually respected. I usually tell employees to position flexibility around performance and sustainability, not around doing less work.
Hmm, hmm,
Yeah.
hmm.
Most leaders respond, I feel better when the conversation is tied to effectiveness, or to energy, or to, say, long term impact. While at the same time, organizations also have to create an environment where people don't feel punished for having boundaries. Because right now the boundaries are blurred, but when we start reestablishing boundaries, it's like, again, a culture shock. So that's what my advice to people is. And of course, uh, I would love to touch upon AI, because that is kind of, um, organizations will start using AI to increase speed and expectations, before they use it to create more breathing room. So, and again, these changes happen when technology shifts, and efficiency kind of becomes more important, um, and productivity kind of takes a backseat.
Makes sense. In theory, right?
Mhm.
AI should give people more time. But in practice, do you think AI will genuinely create more space for life, or will organizations simply fill that recovered time with more work for people?
So, for me, there is, the line is, again, as you mentioned earlier, transparency. So trust and transparency are both are important. Now, if employees understand why AI or data is being used and genuinely feel it's there to support them, then it's very different from, that having that feeling of there's a big brother watching over you all the time, or you're being judged constantly, or at times organizations become obsessed with measuring activity instead of understanding outcomes and well-being. And the real question is, whether whether companies use AI to make work more human, or simply make it more intense. So in such cases, um, where once employees feel monitored instead of trusted, culture erodes very quickly. It's like done. It's like a death knell for culture. So that is why I feel like, efficiency again is what employees should focus on, and productivity, of course, that is the part that AI is helping with these days. Yeah.
From a people and culture perspective, I'm just double clicking a bit on the use of data for
Yeah.
measuring productivity, but XYZ things, right?
Yeah.
So, from a people and cultural perspective, where is that line between helpful data and a surveillance culture that actually destroys trust needed for a healthy work-life balance?
Yeah. So, I don't know if you read about Meta starting to track people's clicks and keystrokes. But they said they were using that to train their models, not
Mm,
to track
mm,
employee movements.
mm.
Um, there's always there will always be that doubt in employees' minds, like, what is the real purpose of this? So organizations, again, it boils back down to two things: transparency, trust. And whenever there is transparency, whenever the accountability is clearly defined, what is expected of employees, I feel the trust naturally occurs. But um, the way some organizations become overly obsessive, with technology, it's not uh, a good feeling. Like, I've seen examples of people who do tailoring jobs, them having to wear hats with cameras on them so they can track the movement, the hand movements. What are the stitches they're putting? How are they tackling, like, when there's issues? So when and again, the reason given is training models.
Mm, mm,
And what do you do with these trained models? Eventually, it happens that, that's sad to say, but replacing humans.
mm.
So people know what the ultimate goal is, and it's as good as having an employee. Or when we had um, these issues in the U.S. around H-1B employees coming and replacing US citizens. It's now technology coming and replacing US citizens as well as H-1B employees is what I feel. And again, the lack of trust in either of these scenarios, or not being clear about the ultimate aim of doing either of these is not helping. What organizations need to boldly say, hey, the ultimate objective of a business is to make profit and to continue growing. And to do that, we need to take certain steps. But what is it that you're giving to your employees in return? Are you going to help them upskill or reskill to continue being relevant in this world? So that is how you build trust. Or if you think that there's going to be an end of the road down the line, you need to be transparent about that. People don't mind, people can plan, but you need to be transparent about that, and do it in a very humane way, because you're still dealing with humans while you're also bringing in all the technology or the changes that you want to do.
I think a lot of employers are doing a great job at explaining how AI is able to replace a lot of human actions and interactions, right? However, most organizations are doing an equally poor job at helping their employees understand how their individual roles are going to evolve, improve, and be better for the individual. I think everywhere that we hear is, you give so many interesting examples. Meta was one example. The other example was people working in workshops with cameras, where the camera is trying to learn from their hand movements. Uh, all of that is happening at such a high pace. I think starting with the employers, if they could explain to their employees on how their roles will evolve, how their individual lives from a work perspective will be more fulfilling. I think those conversations aren't happening. And if they aren't happening enough. You made an interesting point about organizations should go back to employees and be purposeful and intentional in training them, upskilling them, coaching them. I think and I believe that this coaching should extend beyond just the day-to-day task or efficiency or productivity. I think this coaching should extend helping employees imagine or reimagine the evolution of their roles altogether. You know, even for us, for that matter, in human resources, I don't know if anybody is having conversations with HR team members around how a role, for example, of an HR generalist will transform in the future. Everybody, I think, is talking about how the HR generalist can save so much time by using AI. And I'm just using HR generalist as an example. But I feel there should be conversations around and making this HR journalist understand that their role could actually transform into a much more fulfilling role than them managing transactions or managing tactical activities that the role currently does. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I totally tend to agree with you. What AI is going to do is it's going to take away all the administrative and operational type of tasks. So people can continue, or people not continue, people can start doing value added work or bring in their actual expertise. I love to quote Jensen Huang when he said that only two types of people will succeed in the future. First are someone in a trade, either electricians or plumbers, that type of a trade, or people who are neurodivergents. When he says neurodivergence, he means people who can think differently, people who are very creative minds. So I think for a large section of the population, they need to start thinking creatively how to do things differently. Uh, the world would certainly not look uh, and function the way it does today in the next, I would say, 5 years, because the rate at which technology is affecting our lives, almost every company out there needs to be a technology company these days. Uh, and I even when you ask specifically about um, HR, I would like to also give the example of IBM. When IBM started using agentic AI internally, I I was at a conference where they told us that they reduced 50% of their HRBP workforce.
Okay.
So we got to be ready for that. Uh, Again, they did it with good intentions. I'm not sure if the 50% of the HRBPs who are no longer relevant, if they were reskilled or upskilled and moved into
Mm.
different types of roles. I'm not aware of that. But it is happening, and we need to be aware and cognizant and mindful that this change is coming.
For our audience who may have not heard about neurodivergence or who may be hearing this term for the first time, would you be able to explain what it is at a high level?
Um, the way again, I'm not going to go into the textbook definition or the
Mm,
Google
mm,
definition. I'm going to go more about what neurodivergence does. It's more about being able to think differently, looking at a problem in a way that no one else can look at it, or looking at a solution, not just a problem, in a way that no one looks at it. I don't know. I would like to give the example of a lighter
mhm,
that you get in stores. A lighter has multiple highly precision engineered parts, and
mm,
they're all like over 1 billion of them are made every year in a small town in China. I forget the name now. Not small; it may be big industrial town, but one town in China. Most of them. Okay, so these guys, they're constantly trying to see how they can get the most bang for their buck or make the most
mm,
profit. So
mm,
they even one changing one little part or process, even if it brings 0.0001% increase in profit, that that does a lot for them. It's bringing in substantial profit.
mm,
So the
mm,
ability not think about just like 0.01, but to think about 0.0001, bring in that
mm,
one little change, and it having like such a huge butterfly effect on the whole supply chain, on how
mm,
people look at the product, where it's sold, what's the quantity it's sold, and it's very, as I said, it's very uh, impressive of how they manage the whole supply chain. And for us as HR professionals, we got to think differently in how can we bring about that 0.0001% change in our employees. We are 6 billion of us. If they can make
mm,
a change in 1 billion lives, I'm sure little practices can make in the 6.4 billion people or whatever the number is on earth.
mm,
And the butterfly effect that'll have in how people perceive and do things, and how we live as human beings on this planet, because the ultimate goal is to live a sustainable life and leave a good planet for our future generations.
mm.
And we are doing all of this so that everyone in the future can have a better life. So it's all about doing that one little change and thinking about the ultimate goal and thinking differently. That is where I feel neurodivergence can have the impact that it intends to.
Mm. You made a in my book a slightly controversial statement. You said that most companies should become tech companies.
Yes.
Um, how about industries that are or fundamentally have not been technology focused industries, right?
Yeah.
I'll take maybe
Like,
the food industry.
yeah, like even food industry is a technology industry. I would love to give example of the town where I come from India, in Pune. Um, in Pune, there's a very famous store called Chitale Bandhu. They have a product which is called a bakarwadi. Again, people can go look it up. Uh, they used to make it in store when they had uh, like when the demand wasn't like that crazy.
Mm,
They could
mm,
make it in store, but eventually they realized that they need to bring in automation. So today's bakarwadis are all made on a production line, and that's where automation, robotics, AI. There's no industry that it can leave untouched. Manufacturing, again, all about robotics. I don't know if you've heard of dark factories in China, which operate in complete darkness. They make these
Mm,
vehicles because there's no humans involved. It's only machines working. They don't need light. They just need uh, their programs to run in darkness, and that's it.
mm,
So I think uh, there's no uh, business or industry that cannot be affected by technology. Even if it is a non-tech company, they all have to use a software, a tech stack to
mm,
process payments, to deal with clients,
mm,
like a Salesforce type of a solution. Every company is highly dependent on technology. Even lawn mowing, if we can come to that. I have the lawn mowing company I use. They used to send handwritten invoices. Now we know that they're generated via a software.
mm.
Every single business is affected by the way technology functions, and God knows, like with AI, maybe as soon as the guys are done mowing the lawn, they will just like have a QR code that's probably outside my house. They will scan it, and I'll get a notification for an authorization for a charge, and I just authorize it. UPI is big in India, so you can imagine how many businesses in India have been affected or helped and affected in a good way by technology.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let me ask you, let me put you on the spot for a second, right?
Sure.
Think about all of these HR consulting businesses
Yeah.
that all of us are
Yeah.
aware of in
Yeah.
the field of HR. I don't want to take names, but their fundamental business is run by people like you and I,
Yeah.
who are deep experts in certain areas of human resources. It could
Yeah.
be org development, it could be org design,
Yeah.
uh, it could be talent modeling, it
Yeah.
could be recruitment consulting, so on and
Yeah.
so forth, right? What, in your perspective, is the future of these HR consulting business firms?
Um, Interesting point. I was just reading about something related to what HR consulting does. I'm not sure if you're aware that the current HR models that we are using, they're the decades old Ulrich model that we are all still using, which wherein we have
Mm,
the PPs, the
mm,
COEs,
right.
um, and if 95% of the organizations are still functioning well based on a decades old model, with and HR consulting businesses are still thriving
Mm,
without understanding the fact, or with their clients who don't understand the fact that it all boils down to a decades old model.
mm,
I think there is scope to reimagine, rethink, um, and come up with newer models which are more suitable for today's reality. Um,
mm,
in the startup culture, uh, these models they don't stand a chance. Someone should probably come up with these. Some of these HR consulting firms need to come up with a culture guideline for a startup, like a micro culture. How do you build that? Like huge scope, huge scope. I was talking to a company who cater to um, clients who need AI in small size firms only. And Accenture acquired that business, and Deloitte was also fighting to acquire that business. And the firm was like, "What is happening? Like, why is there such sudden interest in us who
mm,
operate at such small level?" That's happening because these big organizations, they don't want to leave any stone unturned, or they don't want to leave out any sort of business segment that they can affect. So
mm,
if we have the same mentality, HR business consulting firms can still continue to thrive by again reinventing, thinking creatively, and uh, understanding what the reality is, and catering to that catering to the needs of that new reality.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Sorry for putting you on the spot, but that makes what you said makes a lot of sense. And interestingly, one of the books behind me is one of the most popular books by Jack Welch. And
Yeah.
GE and Jack Welch has also defined so many ways of working in the industry decades ago, to your point, which still get followed to the T. Many organizations, maybe they have renamed some of these structures, but fundamentally these were devised decades ago, to your point. And I feel you're right. I mean, a lot of the HR consulting firms have to rethink what value is in the first place, and then create those models like you mentioned, that are models of scale, create those models that are deep rooted uh, in the problem statement, and that could keep on be replicated over a period of time, where industries see genuine value in those models. Awesome. um, we know, last question for the day. Um, what do you think the workforce of tomorrow would look like? How do you think? I know it's a broad-winded question, but feel free to fine tune it to any industry that you prefer to. But can you give an example of how or what the workforce of tomorrow would look like? Let's say in the next 3 to 5 years, if that's reasonable.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier, like in 5 years' time, we won't be the way the world functions won't be the same as how it does now. And while I say that, it it is technology is the primary driver of this whole change. Geopolitics is another. Uh, but what also happens is the way these things affect different industries is very different. Like with tech right now, what you see going on is in terms of the layoffs, it's a bloodbath. But whereas in other industries like retail and stuff, there's excitement about technology because that's going to make their jobs easier. And people are excited to learn about technology. So the approach is going to be different in different segments towards how things work out. And what will also happen is with tech, you're going to have this huge, high earning population, which will probably be unemployed. It's a true fact. So, what are the other avenues that this population can explore? I also think there's going to be this sudden and huge burst of creativity or neurodivergence when people start thinking
Mhm.
differently. And there's going to be solutions for every little thing. Like if you uh, go to your kitchen and if you pick up a piece of vegetable and you go to Amazon, you'll find 10 different products to cut or peel every
Right.
single vegetable, every single fruit.
Mhm.
Uh, so that's how much creativity has already evolved. I cannot even imagine what and how much people are going to get creative with. Here in the US, there are certain limitations on the products and materials that you can use. But when you look at technologies or how people game, if I can say, or creatively use the materials available at hand, and if some of those, if I can call installations or products or services or uh, support systems that they're using, if they become mainstream, you don't even know what change that will make. In 5 years, Tushar, maybe you and me will be totally obsolete. We don't know that. But we have to be ready and be creative. Always prepare for the worst case scenario is what I like to say. And so your expectation is set, and then you're not disappointed, and then you can start learning and doing stuff towards avoiding that eventuality.
Makes sense. I love that optimistic perspective. Uh, in closing, anything else that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Um, while we're talking about um, organizations, employees, flexibility, work-life balance, um, let people not lose focus of their work.
Mm.
You as a human being are responsible for yourself as well as for your future generations. Um, Today, human beings have the capacity and the capability to play God. Uh,
Mm.
Today, human beings have taught metals to think.
Mm.
So that is as good as playing God for me. So the kind of stuff we can do um, is unimaginable. So let us use our creative thinking or our cohesive thinking towards changing the lives of everybody around us. Let's do our little bit uh, to affect the lives of people around us in a positive way. Um, and let's have a future in which us as well as our future generations um, are are happy uh, and they look forward to living in that future.
Awesome. Vinu, thank you so much for that message. And most importantly, thank you so much for being on Simply Awesome, people. I wish you all the best for your future as well. Thank you so much, Vinu.
And thank you, Tushar, for doing this. I think it's a great podcast that you've started and a great initiative. I'm sure you will have many more successful episodes in the future, and it's people like you who bring out the thought leadership uh, in the people you interview and which become ideas in the mainstream. So kudos to you for doing this, and I wish you and your team also the very best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vinu.